And welcome back to Work in Progress. I am Jeff Garino. I am here with Paula, Nichole, and Derek. Thank you guys for coming and participating.
Thanks for having us.
We're kind of continuing on our last subject. Sante couldn't be with us, but she's here in spirit, I'm sure. Our subject last time we were discussing the rise in hate crimes in America. The Asian American community has experienced a lot of just horrendous kind of attacks out of nowhere. This is something that has sort of always been there, but not heard of, because in the Asian community, as our previous guest had mentioned to us, is not something that is really discussed or made an issue of in a lot of Asian communities. So we were touching on possibly why that is and what the effect of that is and how that can be changed so that more awareness is brought to that. In the middle of all that, of course, the George Floyd trial was going on. And the verdict came back with that. And I think we weren't recording when that verdict came in. So we're going to touch on that a little bit and some of the things involved with policing as it stands now, at least in the United States and maybe even worldwide to some degree. We'll be touching on those issues. So with that, I'd like to open it up. Nichole, I invited you here because I remember you were doing something very similar to what we've been doing, discussing, issues that involve, stereotypes, discrimination, bigoted thoughts, maybe within Iceland. And I remember doing an interview with you on my experiences with that. So what I'm curious is what prompted you to do that, and what have you learned from that experience, especially here in Iceland?
Yes, Jeff. It was really nice working with you with this project. So I did this with my brother one time when the Black Lives Matter was all heated up, and then we in Iceland, we usually we always look at America, and we always think that, oh, America is the worst, they're racist and la la la, and it's so you can really see the racism in America, but it's really hidden here in Iceland, and almost no one sees it, but everyone who is or people of colors can feel it. So that's why I really wanted to gather people from different ethnicity to just showcase that, like, stigma, prejudice are here in Iceland, and everyone who are of color feels it, not just me, everyone. I think we can all say that we have felt the microaggressions before. Just you walking around and someone will pick you and where are you from? Where are you really from? All these kind of stuff that, always implements that you're an alien in your own country. So we just had enough. That was it was just enough is enough. Let's show people in Iceland how it is in Iceland and how people of color feel about this kind of stuff in Iceland. So that's why we did this video. We just it was just a spontaneous idea, and then all of a sudden we just did it. I don't know how it really happened. It was just so quick, and we were really grateful for all the people that participated and told me their experiences, because these are experiences that are really difficult to come to tell again, because these are experiences that you've experienced as you were a child and really hold on to, and you close this chapter in your life. You don't really talk about it anymore because since you're a child, you've always been silenced when you talk about these stuffs, so I was really grateful for the people that participated in this project of mine, and I hope I could do some more.
No, well, I have to say I was really grateful that you asked me to be a part of that, and I was really surprised when I looked at what you guys did afterwards. Just how many people were here that kind of affected, because I really didn't know, I didn't understand. To that point, Derek, you were with us when we did our protests, and I remember you had some interesting perspectives on your experiences in Iceland. So I'd like to ask you, since that time, what have you noticed? Has anything changed for you? Has anything or people around you been enlightened by that? What's happened since then?
Yes, thank you. So first I want to apologize for the lighting. There's no good lighting anywhere in my apartment. But anyways, to answer your question, with regards to what has changed since the protest or the gathering, in the immediate aftermath, people are kind of trying to like find a Black friend or something to tokenize and to just make themselves, feel better so they can pat themselves on the back. But long term, not much has changed. I've noticed some enlightenment in the community from be it certain friends or maybe like co-workers that I had at the time or etc. But I think things have largely stayed the same, in that people have just gone back to not much caring and just doing what Nichole was kind of pointing out, just, hey, look, America's horrible and everything, but not really looking inside at home at what's going on and what they can do about it.
And of course, I'm not sure if I've ever made mention of this, but Paula is the one who actually got me involved in that protest and going up and speaking. And I was really surprised and heartened because I never met Paula before that day. And I was in a lot of hurt, and being able to have someone to speak with, I never cared who a person was. I didn't care, woman, white, Black, whatever. Just someone that would empathize. So I don't know if I ever told you this, Paula, but thank you for that. Because if it wasn't,
you have, and yeah. thanks for that acknowledgement. But I think your voice is overdue and being heard, and I'm so happy actually to see not only you taking the initiative to speak on stage at the George Floyd event, but also out of that came this, right, like work in progress. And I think that's really, really cool. And I wasn't involved in work in progress, of course, until you roped me in. so I think that they kind of go hand in hand. But I also think that it's worth acknowledging that the way that the protest came together, there were two women, of Asian descent, who wanted to do something when the George Floyd thing happened, when he was murdered. And sorry, I'm closing my window because my husband is playing with the grill right outside. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that they wanted to do something. They knew that I had experience with logistics and organizing protests and calls to activism, and so that's how I actually got involved. And I think that that's really important because at the time I was the one who posted on Facebook, and I, being somebody who's a public relations expert, I should have been aware of the optics of that. So what happened was I posted about it, and there was a lot of kind of pushback on me personally, because it came across as like, why would this white woman in Iceland be, not speak to the community, like the Black community and people of color, about how they were feeling, and then help them organize the event, because I was out in public just immediately going to like right into logistics mode. And I think that was a really fair criticism, and I should have been aware of those optics. But I think it's also important to know that I came in to assist and to show solidarity. I hadn't actually been the impetus. And despite my efforts to encourage the women who had initially started the idea, they have remained in the background for varying reasons. So I will I will keep them in the background at their request. But I do think that Iceland is really active in when we want to be, and rallying around things that need to change, right? You know, like you have everything from the pots and pan protests back in 2008. So everyone's willing to change, but the problem is, I think, to Derek's point, is that that energy doesn't stay consistent. So people get emotional and they want to facilitate change, and they want it legislated so that certain, you know, discriminations don't become part of, anti-discrimination becomes part of law. But the momentum disappears. And I do think that, you know, that is a problem. And I don't know what we can do to address it, except to just keep up the dialogue and discussions and protests. And I think that this is actually a year where we have a really big opportunity to facilitate change. It's an election year, and you know it's an election year because if you go into the groups like Away From Home in Iceland on Facebook, or anything that caters to the either immigrant population or people of foreign descent here, all of a sudden there's a deep interest from political candidates to survey and hear the voices of people of color and immigrants, just all at the same time.
No, I hate to interject, but this segues right into what we were getting on about systems.
Yeah.
And, Derek and Nichole, we hear a lot about African American, and we know about the civil rights struggle. We don't hear much about LGBT community and their issues and struggles, and just horrendous treatment in the system, as well as from hiring to how they're handled by within the system of policing. And you know, the Asian American community, I don't think anybody has, you know, some of the stories that have come out in the United States since these attacks, they, you know, some of the younger generation has said, yes, this has been going on. It's just we've been quiet about it. So what I found is a lot of intersectionality, but a lot of separateness. We all deal with our pain kind of, it's all like if something happens within the gay community, it's like, well, that's their issue. It doesn't touch me. Something happens in the Asian community, that's their issue. It doesn't touch me. Something happens in the Black community, it's their issue. Doesn't touch me. My issue is that I believe that is a function that keeps the system alive. We all have more in common than we do not. And the one thing we all have in common is we're all human beings, and we all deserve the right to live our lives free from worry and oppression. So considering that, how, Derek, I'd like to hear in Iceland, how do you feel about just systematically, is there stigmas or issues that you find come up, whether it be personal or professional?
So can I ask, are you talking in relation to race or just in general?
It could be in race or not. Sorry about that. Could be race or anything that you think that has personally affected you.
Yeah, all right. So just when it comes to the system, I find that just when it comes to, at least with racial issues in Iceland, that there kind of lacks some sort of system or procedure in order to take on issues that pertain to racism, like say in the workplace or elsewhere. Like for example, I mean, I used to work at an tourist establishment, and a lot of the guests, for example, would just make racially loaded comments, xenophobic comments as well. And granted, thankfully, the higher ups of the company took it seriously. But the thing is that there was nothing really to address these types of comments in a legal standpoint, like there might be in the United States. It's just, and even if you were to try to address it here, it's not really taken as seriously, I feel. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a vicious cycle of, you land into these situations and then you either don't say something because it's not going to be taken seriously, or you say something and then it's not taken seriously, and then it keeps happening again. So yes, that's my answer. I guess I will turn this to Nichole.
Hi, yeah. So I fully agree with Derek. It happens to me a lot because I'm a nurse, and here in Iceland, they don't really want to talk to you unless you talk to them first. I feel like that happens a lot. All the nurses, they don't want to, when I start a new job, they don't want to talk to me unless I talk first, and then and there are a lot of comments that I get from patients that I tell my boss, and it's not taken seriously. It's just, it's just a comment. And then there's no like legal standpoint. There's nothing I can really do about it. So yeah, it's always just, brushed off. And then what do? You don't tell the next time. So you're silence all the time, Yeah.
Jeff is saying he's having a bit of technical difficulties, so I'll just interject. What's interesting too about these experiences, I mean, I can only speak from from my own perspective on a gender level. I have also had that experience of needing to kind of talk to people before they talk to me. Actually happened to me today. so when you say that, I was like, that is so common. I don't know what that is culturally. For like an open, outgoing society, we still struggle a little bit with letting people in and being inclusive. Like the inclusivity falls to the people who need to be included a lot of times. And I struggle a little bit with that. Another thing I think that is worth mentioning to your point about like bringing something up and it just being like a comment, it's not seen as something that should have weight and be taken, given its moment. I was actually just talking to a friend about that today, and how, you find yourself in this position, and I'm speaking again from the perspective of a woman and perspective of an immigrant here, just having, like, somebody will ask me like, why about Iceland and living here, and if I don't have the happy answer, right, then I'm penalized for not having that happy answer. And I think that that is likely compounded when there's other factors involved, like race or religion, or like not having a solid handle on English even, right? Like the unofficial second language, even though the Polish population is far more, it's the largest immigrant population, and somehow English is the default, right? So I do think that that's, I feel that on the immigrant and just being a woman. So that's the only perspective I can speak to.
Now, thank you for taking over a battery that ran low. Modern problems. So, we're all relatively young here, and considering Iceland itself is relatively young. And I think the identity of Iceland is a thing. Like, I remember having a discussion about what it is to be an American. And for a long time, for me, that had nothing to do with ethnicity. It had to do with a set of values. And when I've asked a few Icelandic friends and family that I know, and no one could really give me what it is to be Icelandic. And so it defaults to this kind of stereotype. I gotta say, my interest is because my two kids are Icelandic, more so than I could say they're American in anything. Their thoughts, the way they approach life is more from an Icelandic viewpoint. What hurts me is them not being perceived as being Icelandic, and that they have to be questioned. Where are you from? Were you adopted? All this kind of stuff. And up until the point of the protest of the George Floyd murder, I didn't even realize there were that many immigrants in the country. So yeah, that was something that was new to me. So your views on just how well or problems within integrating in Iceland that you've seen? Me personally, I believe it's education is a big area which could stand a little refreshing in Iceland.
Yes, I came to Iceland when I was 8 years old, and coming to Iceland, it was really difficult. It was such a culture shock, because, you know, I've never seen a white person before I came to Iceland. So everything was new, the language was new, and the environment was new. And I really agree with you on the school thing. I think that needs really refreshing, because of I remember when they would call me names at school, and I would tell my teacher about it. She would just say, "They're just kidding. They're just joking. It's not. It's just funny, you know." And they would call me yellow, and I didn't even know what yellow meant. I didn't even know that that was an insult at that time. I was like, "What is yellow? It's like a nice color." But yeah, so that was really difficult, like going to someone that you see as your role model and they're not doing anything, you know, and the teachers are also not like including the parents enough, like just telling the parents about you frístundakort for sports and stuff to get the discount.
Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
I actually literally just found out about that. My child's 8. My husband just takes care of it. Nobody thought to talk to me about that. So.
But if I can come in here to answer Jeff's question, I'm actually writing my thesis right now about what it means to be Icelandic. And I surveyed people actually. And what I found is that there are multiple things that count, but things that people care a lot about are citizenship and language ability, in the Icelandic language that is, and where people were raised and things like that. And what I've noticed is that just kind of what you were talking about, what your kids go through, Jeff, is that, and I definitely experienced this, and I don't know if maybe Nichole and Paula, if you've experienced this, and Jeff yourself, but it's like you're oftentimes having to give your entire life story when no one else has to. And that's just, I mean, people have asked me like, you know, do you speak Icelandic? What's your citizenship? Where were you? Or it's just, but no one else has to answer to any of these things in the room. So it's just, I think that while education, of course, needs to be refreshed, I think that just societal norms need to be refreshed as well. And I've noticed a bit more that, you know, people will ask everyone in the room, what, you know, do you speak Icelandic? Would you rather speak English? Things like that, which is good. Because we don't want to single people out in an attempt to be open and inclusive.
No, that's really actually great. You know, I have to come from everything from my own experience. In my experience, I've been fortunate to have such a variety of people around me growing up. You know, my stepfather's Italian. I've had my neighbors were Irish and Mexican. My best friends growing up were from the Philippines and South Korea. The thing about the and I go back to, I want to get into what we were talking about as far as policing, but going back to the attacks on Asian Americans, What disturbed me the most and what I fear is what has happened, that most Americans are not educated, that Asia is a big place. And a woman who was attacked, you know, they're thinking they're attacking someone who's Chinese, but she was an elderly woman from the Philippines. And this kind of broad generalization is so it's kind of disturbing. It's ignorance in like the clearest form. Because again, like I said, Asia is a big place with many cultures and traditions. It's not this monolith. And it's almost the same thing when it comes to Africa. So that kind of ignorance that I hate to say is mostly from white people who really don't have to know details. And that's where I come from, the education aspect of it. Growing up, everything that I learned was so, now that I look back, was so whitewashed that I did not know, and I was not aware of the many different cultures and influences that have affected life and history. And not knowing that causes one to be injurious of another's identity by just kind of blanketing. It could be, and that's with any group. The accomplishments of women, for instance, the movie, I forget what it was, Figures, with the Black women who were in the space program in the 60s, who were making the calculation. Geez, I don't know, it slipped my mind. But just that alone, which was a recent movie, and was talking about the accomplishments that women contributed to the space race, something I never knew about, but it should really be in the history books, should be something that's really taught. When I learned about slavery in the United States, I didn't realize that there was a ban on Chinese people from becoming citizens in the United States. There was a heavy discrimination going on, just as bad. They were hanging Chinese people on the West Coast. There was, and even in Asia, there was, Japanese talking about Chinese people were dogs. I mean, this stuff is historic, and it shows a sort of commonality that we miss. I say all that to come to us in Iceland. When we did do the protest, when I was interviewed, and I've said this before, but the Icelandic reporters who talked to me, 2 of them said, "Why should we care?" And that struck me, because growing up, I've had like many friends from different parts of the world, and anything that was injurious to them, I took offense to, because they were my friends. And I never understood this "why should I care" attitude. And I find that the people who I come across that the most are those who are not the minority. When you're not the minority, then you have the luxury of really not caring. So we go into, this is how systems work, and having to answer my white friends who haven't experienced the things that I've experienced, and I tell them it's a systemic thing. They are just as uneducated about that as I was about a lot of history. And if you don't know the value of a people, it's really to dismiss a people. And this is how we get into systems of policing. The problem with policing, in the States at least, was they're given unlimited power. There's no accountability, and it comes out of this fear of the other. And we've often heard, "I feared for my life." That statement, and I'm going to get back to our group here. I'm trying to boil it down to our talking points, but that statement, "I feared for my life," always struck me as funny. Now, I'm a big Black guy to a lot of people. I do not see myself as that. I was always the skinny kid in my family. I do not see myself as that big and threatening. I just don't. I like to make people laugh. Okay. But without opening my mouth, I've experienced, even at my job, kind of looks of fear if I'm not where someone expected I should be. You know, like I walk through the halls of the hospital, and if I turn the wrong corner, you know, and it startles me. And as a big black guy, I watch myself when I walk home. I try not to walk in back of anyone. I try to not seem like I'm in a dark area lurking. So this thing about being feared, to a degree, I understand that from a woman's perspective, because the most dangerous animal to a woman is a man. So I get that aspect of it. And also that's not recognized really, but the pathology that goes into these stereotypes and these images we put out have an effect on us all, whether we know it or not. And when I come across someone who may seem afraid of my presence, I think of how sad that is for that person to have to feel that. And then for me to have to feel like I need to go out of my way to make that person not fear. So have you felt this, maybe Nichole, this burden of, you know, people are seeing you. They're not seeing you if they don't know you, but they're seeing someone with an Asian descent background. And do you ever feel like you have to put on something or change yourself in some way to make that apparent? You know what I hope you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I understand. Yes, I always feel this as a nurse. I always feel that I need to, speak first, so people would speak to me. I need to put this, I always need to be ready for my patients, because my patients are usually 80 plus. So I'm always ready with my story. Yeah, where I was born, why I came to Iceland, when did I come to Iceland, and why Iceland? And the sad thing is, people really are interested in speaking to people with different background, but they don't really take the time to educate themselves. They don't take the time to even, to distinguish who is Chinese, who is Korean, who is a Filipino, who is Vietnamese. We have all of these Asian countries here in Iceland. They eat Vietnamese food, Chinese food, Thai food, but they don't really take the time to educate themselves with their cultures, So they're really, yeah. So yeah, I would say yes, Jeffrey.
Derek, would you have anything to add?
Yes, absolutely. So just, yes, definitely. I felt it in a professional sense like Nichole has. And that, I mean, I have no problem speaking first because I am the one working. So I have no problem approaching the people first because that's my job. But I do notice that I feel the need to be more professional than my coworkers need to be, for example, or that I need to know a bit more than they do, or just because I feel like they're not going to be taking me as seriously because they think that I might know less. And then just in a personal aspect, in a social aspect, in social gatherings, pre-COVID times especially, I would have to be a lot more outgoing, I'd have to approach people first a lot as well. So I think that's a very interesting thing. And there's so many reasons why people are just kind of scared to approach people of color in Iceland, but I think that it would do a lot of good to kind of pick this apart and figure out what is going on and try and get to the root of it.
Now, I remember, Paula, in a professional capacity, you have spoke to this, and I find this interesting from a woman's perspective. And I read something about hiring recently. I think I posted it on our Facebook thing. It was a TED Talk talking about how women are perceived in business, whereas if you're too assertive, you're bitchy. And if you're not, then you're weak. And it seemed like a no-win situation that
it can definitely, yeah. Can you guys hear me okay? I changed my settings, so hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like a double bind situation, which is a term I didn't know about until another professional woman who I have a lot of respect for and who I worked with told me that the term for that, where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, it's called double bind. I've definitely had that. I've had conversations with other professionals, particularly professional women. I do feel that men who immigrate to Iceland and who have existing professional experience do that too. Like, I just literally had a conversation with a friend yesterday about how he likely has to kind of dumb down his CV so that he's not threatening to companies here. Companies here need his expertise, but we all know that if we go into a company, like, you want to have just enough expertise where you're attractive for a job and not enough expertise that a founding team or an existing executive team, and in some cases a board, will be threatened by your knowledge. And that's really hard. I think from my own perspective, I didn't have trouble getting work here. I did a lot of work a year leading up to me getting work here. Like, I was networking for a year and a half before I actually started looking for jobs here. And I had a skill set that their board told them they needed. And so I fit, right? I checked that box. But they wanted to pay me, I couldn't get paid more than them. Right? Like, the CEO told me, he's like, well, you can't make that much because I only make this much. And I'm like, yeah, but you have like equity in the company. So you already getting more. And that is not, that conversation was too sophisticated for this market, right? Like, negotiating equity, negotiating bonuses, negotiating anything. So there's a lot of different aspects. And then when you reach a point where your expertise outweighs the executive team and your colleagues, you have to, like, I take a lot of pride in what I know how to do. And the way that's received is either showboating or arrogance, or I'm trying to make the other person feel small. And like, this is something I think that all women in business deal with. So it's like, I'm not trying to make you feel small. I'm trying to prove my worth and share my expertise. And that's been really frustrating. I reached a point where I was really burned out and like was a shell of myself. But even as a shell of myself, I still had to be that much better than literally everyone else in order to just like be able to be at the table.
You see, that is the issue in Iceland that I think is Iceland's Achilles heel. Iceland, in the United States, it was a great country because of its immigration. A lot of great ideas, companies, and inventions came from those who were from somewhere else. And I think Iceland has this issue of not understanding or knowing or even embracing anyone who comes from somewhere else. When I find the same thing in the jobs that I had. I worked at the McDonald's when it was here, when I first came here, in management. And I was shocked because the same books, I was in a regional office on the East Coast in the United States for McDonald's. And when I came here, they were using all the same manuals, the exact same manuals. So me and another colleague from Austria, we both went to their boss and said, hey, we can double sales. Which I didn't, now that you're telling me this, I realize he was like, that's not how we do things in Iceland. And I said, but aren't we here to make money?
You American capitalist.
Yeah. And he just totally like dismissed what we were trying to present to him, because we had seen a problem. One of them was like your drive-through. Like, it's only supposed to take a certain amount of time. And if you've ever gone through KFC drive-through, you know what I mean. But anyway,
drive-through.
The lack of embracing, and I think that's another issue where education in Iceland would be of help, embracing the people who bring other ideas to Iceland. And, you know, it's like I try to tell, when I make suggestions at my job, it's kind of overlooked until they realize that was actually the solution. But I never get any credit. So it's really
but
weird.
Doesn't this feed into, like, okay, so we talk a lot about how, like, there's a lot of discussion in public forums from the government about how to enable immigrants, in particularly, to like assimilate, right? There's very little discussion about how Icelandic society is going to adapt to be a future forward society, right? One that is inclusive, that is diverse, one that has elements of varying cultures that become part of its own culture. And yet, Icelandic society very easily and quickly adopts aspects of other people's cultures as its own, while mutually excluding the cultures that those come from, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of discussion about that in the States too. You know, cultural appropriation. And, you know, I'm maybe not the right person to speak to this, but it'd be really interesting to see if anyone else has noticed this kind of appropriation here in Iceland while othering.
Well, the one thing I'll just add to that is I always want to impress that I'm here in Iceland. I would love to see Iceland excel. I would like to contribute. And the whole thing about being an immigrant is being able to feel like you contribute. And as long as Iceland continues to keep at bay the population that may come or have roots somewhere else, I think Iceland is on a bad course. What do you think about that, Derek?
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to go off of Paula's point about cultural appropriation. Just nothing gets on my nerves more. I mean, that's an overstatement, but nothing gets on my nerves more than when I see these guys wearing these caps and these chains and FUBU and these Jordans and everything. And then they talk to me in English. They don't think I speak Icelandic, or they somehow other me, or they other the other people of color in the room. Yeah, anyway, I just want to vent about that. But yeah. Yeah, anyone else would like to speak?
Take a breath, Derek. It is so infuriating.
Nichole, would you like to add anything to that, the appropriation aspect of being here?
I think I already talked about it earlier when I said, what did I say earlier?
Yeah, no, we may have touched on that as well, but we're getting long in the tooth. We're at our mark. We didn't really even get a chance to touch on everything within our list, but that's quite okay. Because we always love to have continuations. But to sum it up, I think we understand by looking outward in the States and the recent issues in the States that there are systemic problems within the United States. And those systems have to do with otherizing people. And that needs to change. Division.
Well, I think a really good example, just really quickly, is if we're watching the current trial about the arson and murder Breiðaborgstíg. And I was discussing this with friends earlier today, and one of my friends very astutely pointed out that she's so sick of whenever a foreign witness comes up to the stand, their foreignness is the emphasis, not their victimhood. And I thought that was actually really fascinating, because they don't really assign that designation to the Icelandic witnesses. And yeah, I mean, it's in the States, of course, but I think that's also like reflected here. And I think we take a lot of pride here in being like, every time we have an opportunity to be better than every other nation, that makes this tiny little island rise above, like we saw it a lot with the pandemic. Like we were the first, to get the pandemic under control, but we were also the first to be really loosey-goosey about, loosening restrictions. And then we ended up with several more deaths and, like consistent waves over and over again. But I think here, like, we don't self-reflect a lot. And I mean, the thing that stands out to me, and it obviously touched a nerve with both you, Nichole, and Derek, is that inclusivity and, the irony of that, appropriation. And like, we're putting the onus on the people who have that culture, to explain to the people who have adopted that culture where that culture comes from. And I know that just as somebody who grew up in a predominantly white Catholic town in Massachusetts, Boston is a very diverse town, but Boston is a very segregated town. Like there's only recently, overlap between different cultures. Every neighborhood has a different neighborhood, or every culture has a different neighborhood. And so I know that I had to learn, and then I'm still learning, and I'm still making mistakes about, like things that I kind of either took for granted or didn't really realize the background of. And I feel really awful every time a friend who comes from either is either a person of color or comes from a different religious background has to like burden themselves with explaining to me something that I was completely ignorant about. So like, I think it's kind of also on the society here, predominantly like the quintessential Icelander, to figure out and be aware and like acknowledge when they're making mistakes and correct them moving forward.
That's really a good point. In your relationships, to sum up, because this now perked a little curiosity to me, for Derek and Nichole, have your relationships with others been one of, in light of recent issues, what we've been talking about, has it been one where you found yourself being a teacher? Have you found yourself having to explain things?
Yes. Yes, Jeff. I feel like I always have to talk for all the Asian people. When I talk to my friends about cultural appropriation. I hate Halloween. Halloween for me is the worst, because that's when the culture appropriation just, is in rise. So yeah, I find that I always need to be the voice for many Asian people, which I don't want to be. I mean, I want to be the voice for Filipino people, not all the Asian people, because we all experience different things, It's not the same. We're not, I mean, we are Asians, but we're not just, I'm a Filipino. I don't know how it is to be Chinese or Vietnamese or, yeah.
And yes, I definitely relate to that point. Just kind of feel like I always have to be a spokesperson. Even before Black Lives Matter kind of exploded recently, in relatively recent years, like re-exploded, but yes. And especially just being Black, I mean, I'm African-American. I can't speak for the West African immigrants. I can't speak for the East Africans. I cannot speak for Caribbean people here, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm constantly having to. So it's just, yes, education, again, we hammer on that. We've been hammering on it this entire session, but education is so extremely important.
Okay. Okay, I don't want to extend our welcome. We are at our end. I want to thank you guys for participating because I always learn something, and I always, remind myself to be humble of the things that I don't know. For our community, immigrant community, this show has had voices on, and I just hope that an Icelander, one or two, might be curious enough to actually listen and take this message forward, because in that inclusivity, they might realize that we are all here to as a benefit to the country in which we've adopted and we definitely care about. We will continue on our discussions on recent events and issues that affect us, and hopefully bring about some maybe answers or help to build a better Iceland. So again, thank you for coming. This is work in progress, and we will definitely be continuing. You are welcome to come back. I like this as a forum for you to have a voice, for everyone should have a voice. So thank you, and we will see you again next recording.